All right, we are back here at the Moxie Hotel. We are about the halfway point of Winter Jazzfest, and right
Amazing.
now we're going to fast forward to Friday when you're going to be performing, and not only performing, but also hosting a showcase for your label and showcasing some of these great musicians that you've been working with and helping put out their music. So, set the scene for us. What can we expect Friday, and who are some of the players involved?
Yeah, I'm super excited for this show that's coming up. So we have Rainbow Blonde Records, which is the record label that I co-founded with Jose James and Brian Bender. We're doing our first, hopefully of many, of our label stages, which essentially is starting with a panel. So it'll be myself, Jose, Brian Bender, and Jeanette Beckman. She's our house photographer and a total living legend whom I love. So
Yeah.
we'll do that panel from 5 to 6. Then we have Keon Harold is performing on trumpet. Then Anissa Strings, who, if you don't know, is about to take over the universe. She'll be playing. She's a bassist and a singer. Then I go on. Then Ben Williams is presenting his new album, I Am a Man, which is coming out on Rainbow Blonde and
Amazing.
is a total beautiful statement that's going to change the earth. And then Jose James has a show. He's playing his album, No Beginning, No End 2, which is also coming out on our label on March 6th. And then Jay Horde, one of my favorite singers in the world, is closing out the show. So it's a lot of music that night.
Amazing. And I know a lot of the people involved in the label are part of your musical community. You guys have collaborated. You guys are friends. You're part of the same scene. Can you talk a little bit about how it's been, starting the label, you and Ben and Jose coming together to put out people's music and kind of take this community you've had on stage and kind of bring it into the studio in a
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. That has been one of the great honors of my life so far. And it's not just our community as artists, it's also what we do as people. So Jose and I both have been doing that, I say sort of informally for the last 10 years. We've been fostering this community and like loving this community and lifting it up and creating sessions and Jose taking artists on tour. We've been doing that informally. But the label was this sort of behemoth undertaking that I don't know that we really felt we could do ourselves, but the three of us can do together. And so what we've tried to do is create, and I think we have successfully created one of the most artist-friendly deals and labels around. It comes from both Jose and I having a decade of experience. I worked at Blue Note Records for 5 years. This will be his 9th album, his 5th record deal, so he knows a lot. And so what we wanted to do was, first of all, showcase this amazing community that you mentioned of just innovators and trailblazers and incredible people, and also bring a deal and a business model that would honor those people and not trap those people and give them a good, a family and a base that I feel has been lacking in the sort of major label continuum.
Yeah, and you guys have this amazing showcase, and
Yeah.
collaboration is something that's always been core to to your music and to your community of artists. So I want to talk about your album and your EP, but while we're down here in the lower or the edge of the Lower East Side in
Pretty
the
close.
village, I know that is for many years was your home base before you went to California and then came back.
Yeah.
How did you first get involved in this Lower East Side music community? You were playing a lot of the venues around here, like Rockwood Music Hall,
Yeah.
collaborating with people across genres and across scenes. What was your gateway to this music world?
Yeah, so when Rockwood Music Hall Stage 1 opened, I used to come down, I was in high school, and I would come downtown and I was obsessed with that scene. It was all I wanted. And also I'm a Jewish woman, so we went to the Lower East Side all the time when I was a kid, and I just had it in my mind that was just where I wanted to live. And so I was a student at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, needed to find an apartment, and it was like a no-brainer. And all I wanted in my life, really, like my number one ambition was to be a person at Rockwood. Like
Yeah.
to know the bouncer and the owner and the bartender and everybody knows my name. And that ended up happening. And it was a beautiful moment in my life and in my trajectory. And I come from a big Jewish family. Like, we are a community-based people. And so to bring that into my art became this really like beautiful synthesis of all the things that I love the most. And so I was living on Orchard, and there, because of the dynamics of of capitalism. Not a lot of people can live there.
Yeah.
You know, I had a rent stabilized apartment. And so no one knew anyone who lived on the Lower East Side. So my house was like the designated post and pre-Rockwood hang.
Nice.
And so for years, it was like you'd play Rockwood and end up at my house. We had a piano and we had all these instruments. And, you know, I created a session called the Orchard Sessions that we would film in my apartment. We had tons of guests, Snarky Puppy and Kate Davis, Becca Stevens, Jose, and I essentially was trying to show the world this community that I adored, you know, because the first time that I went on tour singing background for Jose, I realized that outside of New York, there's like people didn't necessarily know the people who I thought were like totally famous.
Right.
And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody could see these people, to hear their music. You know, and the Lower East Side it's like my heart. It's my heartbeat. You know, I moved out sort of quietly. I haven't really like announced it. I left a few months ago, but it holds every part of me.
That's amazing. You know, Lower East Side, the gateway to New York for generations and generations. You mentioned Rockwood. It's about the 15th anniversary is next month.
I'm performing.
They're doing a great February 5th, I believe.
Yeah.
They're doing a great celebration, bringing back many people like yourself who were kind of key to the growth of Rockwood and that experience. Do you remember the first time you actually took the stage there?
I do, and I have chills with you asking.
Yeah.
I'm telling you the truth. I really do, because I was 19 or 20, one of the two, and no one would book me. No one would book me, and that, I mean, it makes sense. I like didn't have anything going on, and there's a guy named Matt Carey who still books there, and he took a chance, and he does do that. And in this day and age, but specifically in the city, again because of those capitalist things I mentioned, not a lot of venues can do that, and there aren't a lot of people like Matt. So he booked me, and I was like over the moon. Play Rockwood 1, I'd been coming down, like I said, for a decade, and well, not a decade, but 5 or 7 years. And I do remember the first time I got on stage, I had like rehearsed it to the nines. It was like a big deal. I brought in all my band, and Becca Stevens is still one of my best friends. She came and sang a song with me, and I remember like looking out. Rockwood has these windows, and you can see Allen Street. And I remember looking out, and it was the first experience I had with visualization, because I had been there so much. And it was the first time that I realized, like, oh, you can place yourself on the stage and look, there it is. There are the cars going by. It was like the most romantic experience of my life, and I remember it fondly. And, to say, like, I've brought anything to Rockwood, I think they've brought much more to me. Like, I would not have a career without them. Every chance I've taken, they've been there, and I haven't been back in a long time, so I'm very honored to be part of this festival.
And we'll tip our invisible hats to Matt, who been a great friend of Relics as well, and myself. Actually, we went to college together, so I've known Matt for a long time, and he's someone who, as you said, has taken a chance on a lot of different musicians and has a wide variety of interests, and kind of finds a place for all of them at the various Rockwood stages. So thank you, Matt, out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, you have a lot of new music coming out, and your album and your EP have kind of been a little bit of a document of your journey across the country and back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you are a native New Yorker. You grew up in the city and the surrounding areas, and obviously were part of that community. What brought you to LA originally, and I guess brought you back home? Yeah.
So I left Lower East Side. I was originally supposed to just go for 3 months. I had gotten really frustrated by the sort of like the gentrification and all of the changes that were happening, and things had gotten kind of small. And also, LA right now is having a renaissance. They're having a songwriting renaissance, and I'm a songwriter. So that album that I put out was my first as a singer, but I've been writing songs for other artists for a decade. And so I went out there, for 3 months because I'd been going out the year before. I went out 11 times, and it was just like, let's just do this for a couple months. And what ended up happening was that I met an incredible community of really powerful women out there who were just kicking ass. And I also, there's a scene in LA that I really needed where they write like every day. It's a writing scene, and I needed that. So I ended up staying for 2 years. The way that my life is with my partner, we travel and we tour all the time, so it doesn't quite matter where we live. I got a little apartment in Los Feliz and met an incredible producer who I co-produced that album with, named Josiah Kozier, who changed my life and really sort of allowed me to create a sound that I had been sort of dancing around, I think, for a long time, because his ear is so in LA pop. that he was able to kind of bring it. And together we ended up somewhere in the middle of,
Yeah.
my harmony and like songwriter New York harmony, and also my, Jewish roots, and his pop sensibilities made that first album, I Am Here. And then, and I have no ill will towards Los Angeles, despite my native New Yorker-ness. I could say things about both cities, but in the end, what ended up happening was that my partner was back here, and it was time. It was time to come back. So we did a cross-country road trip, which had been a dream of mine for a long time. And we actually launched our label with that road trip. It was a Rainbow Blonde trip, so it was sponsored by the W Hotel in Cadillac, and we started at the W in Hollywood, did a Rainbow Blonde show with Ben and Jose and myself, and then ended at the W in Times Square, which was really pretty wild and amazing.
That's amazing, yeah.
We documented the whole thing, and now I'm back. And the EP that I just put out, and there's another companion piece. One's called Were Most of Your Stars Out, that's out now, and the other one, Were You Busy Writing Your Heart Out, is coming in May. Both of those EPs, I think, are very indicative of a return to New York. They're much more acoustic and organic, but all of them are part of my sound.
That's amazing. You mentioned, the EPs, and the one that's out definitely has that, acoustic flavor. Is the one coming out in May a similar style, or have you kind of do you divide them up just because creatively it made sense to release things in chunks, or was there, stylistically, are they fraternal twins in that sense?
I'd say they're fraternal twins. Were You Busy Writing Your Heart Out? And they're part of my favorite book is Seymour an Introduction. It's a Salinger book, and so I have Where Most of Your Stars Out is tattooed on my back, and the next sentence is Were You Busy Writing Your Heart Out? So they are companion pieces. But I would say that the next EP that's coming is kind of in the middle of my album and the acoustic EP. Part of why I put out that acoustic EP is that when I started to tour the album, which I did pretty extensively, I realized that electronic performance isn't necessarily for me. It's just not something that I'm not the best at it. Yeah. And I wanted to play more. Like, I missed playing keys, and so we made Were Most of Your Stars Out, and this next one that's coming, Were You Busy Writing Your Heart Out, which we're currently in the process of producing. Like, I've recorded the parts, but it will have a lot more synthesizer.
Yeah.
But it won't have any drum machine. So it'll be sort of in the middle of the two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And obviously Salinger, a famous New York character,
yes.
and someone who's, even though he didn't live here his whole life, is very symbolic of at least a certain New York experience.
Absolutely. And the
culture.
Glass family.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we're getting deeper into our Salinger here too. No Catcher in the Rye A-sides here,
Just full on B. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, you've also touched upon this several times while we've been talking, but your Jewish identity is very important to you and has worked its way into your music.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your family life in that sense. Were you guys observant growing up? What type of Judaism did you practice, and how did music play into all that?
Yeah, absolutely. My family is sort of like the Glass family. That's how we started, which is such a deep reference. And I'm so sorry if you're on this live and you're like, what? But it's a great book. And my family, we were like that, sort of like a sort of intellectual Jewish East Coast New York family. But we were observant. I didn't seem observant because we weren't Orthodox. We were, conservative Jews. But we celebrated Shabbat every week. My dad is very observant. He wraps tefillin every morning and prays, and it's like a practice for him. It's very spiritual. But mostly we just grew up very much with that identity of progressive Jewish New Yorkers. Like, I grew up, I cut my teeth on Clara Lemlich from, the Triangle Shirt Factory protests, and Emma Goldman, and just all these badass Jewish women from New York who had just really changed the fabric of the country, at least our country, and we were always singing, always. We celebrate Shabbat every week. We sing together. There are 5 of us, but we're a much bigger family. Yeah. And so there was just always music, and always Jewish music specifically. Again, something that I didn't realize was unique or in any way strange until I left my house. And so it was always very much a part of me, and it became a conflicted part of me because when I left, my dad, I grew up with this really progressive, family who was so accepting of everyone, and I felt gave a very balanced accounting of who we were and how we may want to live in the world. And when I left, I didn't find those Jews. And to be fair, I didn't seek them out. I wasn't like, these aren't mine, let me see if there are others. I was like, that's enough. And so I distanced myself very much from what I found to be often like a racist, and not tolerant Jewish community. And then when I moved to LA, actually, I really missed it. It was the first time. I feel like New York, there's a vibe. It's just like, oh, bagels, Jews, of course. Right. Like we're everywhere.
Katz is around the corner from Rockwood.
Exactly. In LA, it was the first time that I really experienced like very overt anti-Semitism in writing sessions. Wow. And, I look a certain way, but I also wear my Jewishness very much on my sleeve. And so people feel very compelled to tell me all sorts of things. And so I was having these conversations and feeling so lonely and really distanced. And that was the first time that I sought out a Jewish community myself. And I found one called Nefesh that changed my entire life. That was like everything. I wept through the whole first service. It was so many Jews of color. It was the melodies I grew up with. And I finally realized, because they actually have a band. It's like, it's not common for Jews to have instruments in our habitual music, like in ritual. When we're in any sort of temple, we don't have instruments, we just sing. And so they had instruments, and I realized like how much that harmony had really shaped me, and also how much I wanted that in my music. Identity is the best thing you can have, and I'm so grateful to my family for it, and I have deep love for Jewish culture and music and food and all of it.
You mentioned that your album was kind of a meshing of kind of where you and your producer were coming from, and obviously this was a chance for you to kind of incorporate some of that spiritual music into your pop music.
Mm-hmm.
When you first kind of approached that idea, was that something that people immediately latched onto, or did you kind of have to sell them on it for a second?
Still having to sell them on
it.
Yeah, it's confusing, especially in the Jewish community, because I feel like the Jewish community wants, like, they're down for sort of like a Matis Yahoo, you know what I mean? Like that, like if you're still very much, what I do doesn't exist. Yeah. Which is cool, but also difficult. I looked around for a long time to try and see, like, is there someone I could open for? Is there someone we could compare this to? And it doesn't exist, which is amazing. But yeah, it took a second, and it's still taking a second, because it's not world music. Like Idan Reichel, someone like that. He's this incredible singer out of Israel, and he samples Jews like from all around the world, and it's world music, though. It's very much that. And then there's someone, who's making Jewish music, that's sacred, and then there's me, like Solange when she made A Seat at the Table. That's an incredible album that shaped my whole life and many other people's lives, but that album is for Black America with love, and with, that's an album that wasn't made for me. That's how I feel about that album. Like it's firmly rooted in Jewish culture. But again, very funny to have that conversation with non-Jews who would be like, anti-Semitism comes out real fast. Right, They're like, this doesn't sound Jewish to me. And you're like, what is Jewish to you? And you find out real quick.
Well, I guess I think spirituality and religion come to people at times of personal struggle too. I know you had some health issues prevented you from performing and singing. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and either how that caused you to look at your own faith in any way, if it did, and also how the recovery's been and the ability to get back up there and sing and record?
I had it's funny when you say that, because that was probably like the deepest, lowest point of my life, and I had no spirituality whatsoever. It probably would have helped. But I had I had really bad vocal cord issues. I never learned how to sing. I never learned how to sing. I'm a piano player. The school that I went to has since fixed this, but when I went, I love them. They were like, we're a jazz school. Sing, and so I never learned how to sing, and I blew up my voice really quick. I was making some destructive decisions. I blew up my voice early, like 21, early. And so from basically like 21 to 28 or 27 was essentially this kind of like minefield where I learned everything, but I don't think I was willing to let go of some of the things that you really do have to let go of, Like if you're going to sing for a living and you have these kinds of issues, you have to change how you eat, you have to change when you eat, there's warm-ups and things that you have to do because your body is your instrument. And I wasn't focused on those things. So eventually I blew it out in 2016. It was actually part of what got me to LA, because then I couldn't talk. I had to have a surgery immediately. Wow. I couldn't talk for months. I got really bad tendonitis in my arms, so I also couldn't write or type. So it was just like a fully non-communicative.
Wow.
Yeah, and in New York City, like, that means you're housebound. You can't. I mean, if I go outside, I would have like Miles Davis'd myself if anything happened. Yeah. And so, it was a deeply introspective experience, and it was a moment, also for better or for worse, where I got to see and I've had a few of these in the last few years, where I get to see how can my community show up? Do they or do they not? Yeah. Who does and who doesn't, And the recovery process was slow. It was slower than I wanted it to be, and with the help of an incredible little Yoda man in Morningside Heights named Jim Carson, who everybody told me to see. And if you are having any sort of vocal issues, he is the dude. He's amazing. And Jim specializes in, broken voices. And a lot of people say they do that, and they don't. Jim does. And he helped sort of bring me back to life. Jim and a doctor named Peek Woo. I had to learn how to speak again. Wow. Because speaking is use of your vocal cords. Someday I'm going to do like a gallery exhibition where I just put all of my scopes of the last decade up. Like, there's so
the art of your vocal cords.
Exactly. Yeah. But it really did change my life. I started writing morning pages every morning. It's from The Artist's Way, where you write because I just couldn't talk. So, that was the only thing that I could do. And then my arms would like go on fire. It really allowed me to understand an inner dialogue, and also to pause and to consider what a conversation is. Yeah. Because I was real loud. I seem loud now, but I was a lot pre-surgery, and friends of mine would come over, and the loud friends, it was the same. They would just talk the whole time. But my quiet friends, I felt like I was meeting them for the first time. And so it has changed how I move through the world. And also just makes me love singing every minute of my life. Absolutely, like, it just feels like I've been born again and I got some second chance. So.
And I'm sure the experience of stepping on stage with your voice back intact must have been like almost like stepping on stage at Rockwood for the first time.
Exactly. Yeah. Jose brought me on. It was on my birthday. It was the first day I was cleared to sing. And he was at the Blue Note, and I had written a song. He had this album called Love in a Time of Madness, and I had written 7 songs on that album, which at that time was the most I'd ever written continuously for an artist. So I got to sing one of those songs, and I just cried through the whole thing. I just cried. Yeah. But I remember it with a similar gravity. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, we have this Friday, and then we have February 5th, I believe, at Rockwood. Mm-hmm. We have the new EP in May. What are we up to until then?
Oh man, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, Rainbow Blonde Records has a release coming out every Friday until June.
Amazing.
And Rainbow Blonde Records is 5 people.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of up to my ears in a really good way. Mm-hmm. So I'm finishing up the production on this next EP. Touring. I'll be touring as a special guest with Jose. So I'll be in Japan and China with him for all of February. And essentially, on big shows, I'll be the featured guest. Yeah. And I'm also, the big thing of this year is that I'm writing a very ambitious second album.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about it. Because Brian Bender, who's our co-founder, has such a sonic gravitas, and I haven't really used it yet. I produced my first album. But if you listen to Ben Williams' I Am a Man, and I will send it to you, or Jose's, it's just, Brian is really creating, to me, like early Blue Note, Rudy Van Gelder just made the sound, and Francis Wolff took the pictures, and Brian Bender is an absolute genius. So I'm very excited to co-produce this with him, and that'll be the year for me, I think.
Amazing. And, coming through these acoustic albums, are we going to have a little more of that flavor, or do you think it'll come, more elements of the first album?
I think it'll be more of the second. It'll definitely be much more acoustic, for sure. Because now I'm considering touring, Yeah. So I need to know that I can bring a band, because that's magic. And there are people who do it so well. My friend Wokes, Sarah, she's a singer named Wokes, and she does this incredible Ableton show that's it's like you're a church. I mean, it's incredible, but I'm not that kind of performer. So this next album will definitely be quite a few acoustic instruments, potentially some Jewish ones. I avoided them at first, but maybe might bring in a violin or a clarinet or two.
Well, awesome. Well, we will see you Friday and
Yeah.
in February and a lot more before May. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.